Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the 2022 Power Women Summit for the Wrap. Particular segment is Inside the Writer's Room, telling stories that matter. And we have some women, honey, that are definitely telling some stories that matter this season. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the stage, Miss Ning Zhao, who's coming to us from Ozark. Hey, Ning.
Hi.
Our next panelist, Christy Cairns from The Good Nurse.
Hello.
Cherise Castro Smith from Encanto. Hey, girl.
Hello.
Brittany Nichols from Abbott Elementary. What's up, my sister?
What's up, y'all?
And last but definitely not least, Miss Dana King from The Woman King. Dana Stevens. Why
Hello.
did I say Dana King?
Dana Stevens. You can say Dana King. We're all women king here.
You're a queen, girl. You're a queen. It's all good. So I just want to start the conversation out by acknowledging that you all are powerhouses in each one of these genres of writing that you're in. And for people watching, I want to know, who are your muses when you begin writing a project, regardless of if this project or whatever project it is? What is it that inspires you, that becomes your muse in the process of your writing? And since I messed up your name first, let's go with you, Dana.
Well, I certainly have to say that on The Woman King, my muse was definitely Viola Davis, who is also the producer of this movie. It's the first time I've ever written knowing the actress that was going to definitely be playing this part, which was amazing to just kind of feel like I could hear her voice. When I write, when I get done with a draft, I think about the actor that I want to play it, and I pretend I'm reading it back to myself and I'm Brad Pitt or whatever. And I usually find myself thinking, oh God, no, Brad Pitt doesn't want to do that. And I had those experiences a lot writing The Woman King, when I would think about Viola and want to get it right, knowing that she was going to play this role. But I also think there's a lot of muses out there right now. The women in Iran, protesting for their rights, the Chinese young people right now protesting. I mean, I really feel like we want to tell stories that are powerful, that are about conquering over, oppressive governments and people.
Absolutely. Speaking of powerful stories, Christy, I'm going to swing to you next, because The Good Nurse is an extremely powerful story in terms of this nurse finding out that her friend is less than stellar and it's got shenanigans, for lack of a better way to say it. I don't want to get too much into it for people that have not seen the film, because I want to encourage them to see you all's projects. So I won't say too much about the projects. I'll let y'all do the talking. But with something like The Good Nurse, I know that the real nurse was probably amused for you with this project, yes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Amy Lochran, who is the nurse that caught the bad nurse, which we didn't title the film that, she was really incredible. And this was actually my first paid job. I wrote this 10 years ago, or I started writing it 10 years ago. So I basically turned up at this woman's house in upstate New York and was like, I'd like to tell your story. I'm sorry, I'm 24. And I need your help. And she did, and she helped me for 10 years, and no one had really knew what she had done. So getting to like be a part of bringing her story to a wider audience was like a real privilege. And yeah, she was a massive muse. And I think as well, for me, it's a bit cheesy, I suppose, but like my mum and my gran were my muses. Like they grew up in Scotland and like didn't have a lot of money, and movies were just such a big part of our life, of what we enjoyed and what we consumed, and writing things that I think they would enjoy, or would have enjoyed, really gives me a great sense of pleasure and achievement. So yeah, them as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Ning. With your project Ozark, I was particularly into this one because I'm from Missouri. I'm a Midwestern girl. I'm from St. Louis. And I was like, oh no, they talking about laundering money and carrying on in the Midwest and St. Louis. Like, I know that happens in Chicago, but they talking about Missouri. What is happening? So having said that, what is your muse for something of that nature? Because that is crazy.
It was fun. I mean, I think we had so much fun on that show, and obviously Jason Bateman and Laura Linney are having that actor, to what Dana was speaking to, kind of in your mind of what they can do. And then obviously, like, as we were writing across seasons, you start to find what their rhythm is and you understand what their process is. And particularly two actors as skilled as they are, watching someone like Laura Linney take a scene that you've written and carve her own path out of that scene is like, it's an experience that I think every writer should have, because I think it teaches you sometimes how little you need to write, but also the important stuff that you need to put on the page and include and have those conversations in terms of tone with an actor. But I think on that show, I think the characters just popped off the page so much from the pilot that Bill Dubuque did, that it was kind of easy to sort of like find the rhythm of that. And also, like, it's so funny hearing that you're like I'm from Missouri and I student. I mean, it was, I think it just kind of came together. It was like, I think we wrote it how, you've never really seen a show kind of set in that environment. So we were just like, well, we've seen Sopranos and we've seen, action movies like Heat and things like that. So why not just put that in the voice of, people in the Ozarks?
Listen, that's what I'm saying. The only time I've ever seen something from that vantage point dealing with the Midwest, specifically Chicago, is the Untouchables movie with Kevin Costner. That was based in Chicago, right? But I'm like, oh, y'all going to Missouri now? I can't even handle it. Charisse Castro Smith, talk to me about who your muses were in your journey in writing Encanto.
Sure. I'd be lying if I didn't say that probably one of my primary muses on this project was my 14-year-old self. That when I started writing this movie, I grew up and loved and watched Disney movies as a kid. These protagonists were always so beautiful and perfect and not relatable to me. And so when I started working on this movie, I wanted to make a character that had sort of the same insecurities and sort of complexity and foibles that I had, that a lot of my friends had at that age. And so I was really kind of writing for a younger part of myself, and also for my daughter, because she was Mirabelle was a character that I wanted to share with her and share with future generations of kids, just in terms of knowing that like imperfection is lovable. So that, yeah, those are my primary muse, I guess.
You kind of look like Mirabelle. It's kind of funny. You kind of look just like her.
I've gotten that before.
First time I've heard that. And last but not least, Brittany, you're dealing with a TV series that is dealing with Black educators, but they're almost making fun of themselves in the process, making fun of the process of them educating, not them actually being educators. And I just want to speak to how you have discovered muses within that process, especially because a lot of it appears as though a lot of what is spoken on camera seems to be improv. Is it improv or more scripted?
Oh, there's very little improv on the show, actually.
So funny. It looks very okay. So talk about that for a second. Talk about how you are inspired or who your muse is to make it appear that way, because it's very, very well done.
I think that my muse in all of my projects is like Charisse, just my younger self. But in terms of what I have watched, I watched a lot of television growing up, and I just try to make comedy that isn't punching down, even though honestly some of my favorite comedies from when I was growing up are very problematic. But I try to make stuff that would have helped me become the person that I want to be, both morally and creatively. And this is such a rich world because it's, everyone has been to school. So a lot of the things that, or not everyone, but most people have been to school. Most people, even if it's homeschool, have like some sort of interaction with the educational system. And we use a lot of our own experiences. We don't have to sort of like be terribly out of the box. Because the stuff that happens in schools is wild. Even the wildest thing that you could come up with, like, probably has happened to someone. So just mining our own childhoods and experiences with teachers in our own lives to come up with a lot of the stories and a lot of the growth that happens. Like these characters are in their mid-20s, which is, I think for the two that are, or the three that are, so many of us just got past that. Our writers room is a lot of folks in their early 30s, late 20s, and so we're looking not too far in our own past to say what were we learning at that time and what can we infuse into the characters.
Okay. You guys, all of you are telling stories that matter, from The Woman King to Ozark to The Good Nurse to Encanto Abbott Elementary. Do you think at any point, being in a writer's room, as you are telling these stories that matter, did your gender or your ethnicity ever hinder your journey infiltrating your way into a writer's room? And I'll start, since I left off with you, Brittany, I'll start with you on this one.
I think it's about what sort of room it hinders you in getting into. Like, I don't think it hindered me in any of the rooms that I've been in. I think that it has specifically like helped me in those rooms, because a lot of the shows that I've written for have been about people of color, about queer people, about women, and having a lot of those intersecting identities has made me, a candidate that people seek out. I think that has been changing and continues to evolve, and that people want folks that have had some of the shared experiences of the characters in the room, helping bring a level of authenticity. So yeah, the rooms that it may or may not have kept me out of are probably rooms that I would never have wanted to be in the first place.
I know that's right. Dana, you are in this writer's room for The Woman King, and we're dealing with a very challenging time in history, dealing with Black women in a really challenging sort of situation. How much were you hindered in trying to tell this? Because this story matters. It matters that we know this part of history. Because honestly, before I saw this film, I knew very little bit. I knew about the Dahomey tribe, but I knew very little about their place in this part of history. So how challenging was it for you to be able to bring that to the forefront as a woman who is not of African American descent?
Right. Yeah. It was really important to me to write the movie that is not from a white gaze. It is not from a male gaze. The movie's story is really through the eyes of Nawi, through the eyes of Naniska. And I had Gina Prince Bythewood and I had Viola to lean on if I ever hit a wrong note, or, I had these wonderful partners and teachers to kind of make sure that we hit the notes authentically. And also, we had the sort of the studio. We had Nicole Brown, who's the head of TriStar, who is a woman of color, as our champion. But we still had the larger picture of, do we make a big budget movie that has an entirely Black women centered cast, and we were all rowing the boat in that direction and doing everything we could to help them see that this is a commercial film. And one of the most exciting things about having had the movie come out now is that it was commercially successful. It did prove that people want to see great stories, great adventures, and they will see them about Africa. They will see them about anything, as long as they're good and they're involving. So those were some of my experiences. There's many more. I mean, it is a time in history which has a lot of controversy in itself. So there was a lot to think about there as well.
Absolutely. That's why I asked you that question, because that was a very complicated time in history and there's a lot going on with it. Thank you so much for answering that with such breadth and depth. I appreciate you for that so much. Charisse, let's talk a little bit about Encanto. Recently, I would say like in the last 5 to 10 years, we've been seeing a lot of Latino projects coming to the forefront, being done from a Latino gaze. How important is that from you? Because you spoke earlier about Encanto being inspired or being mused from your 14-year-old self, but how important is it for you to be able to have a part in telling these stories that matter from a Latina gaze?
Sure. I mean, I think it's really important. It's critically important, right? Like, um, obviously, I think all of us have written cross-culturally, and it's a great thing to do. But when I took this project on, I started working on it about 3 years before the movie came out. I felt a tremendous amount of responsibility, right? The movie is about a Colombian family. I'm not Colombian, I'm Cuban American. So there was a part of me that was always leaning into that research and really leaning on our cultural consultants, because it's a different culture in some ways, but there's a lot of similarities, right? Like in terms of family and how we feel about family. I think like there's a lot of common threads in the Latinx experience. And so I felt a tremendous amount of pressure, which was not so helpful, really, as I was writing this movie, um, to get it right and to have those stories ring authentically. I mean, one of the biggest parts of the movie that was important for me to get right was the story of intergenerational trauma and healing that happens when the family loses their grandfather, and sort of how that ripples down through the family. So it was critically important. I was really lucky. I had an amazing producer that I was working with, Yvette Marino, who is by my side. She's Mexican American. And we had obviously Lin-Manuel and our wonderful composer, Jermaine Franco, and the rest of the team were so fabulous. So it is very important, I think, to have Latinx writers at the table when you're creating these projects, and really give them a voice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. For the sake of time, I'm just going to ask this one last question and have you all kind of weigh in on it. You can talk as much or as long as you want. Okay. So I want to go back to you guys' humble beginnings and find out, what are the 5 things that someone would need to know to infiltrate the world of writing for either television or film? Because the women that are watching this, they love the fact that your stories have mattered in one way or another, but they also probably want to know, there's some budding writers out there, how to get into that world, how to infiltrate in that world. What is that journey like? So I'll start with Ning on that one.
I have kind of an annoying answer, but I think also a helpful answer, which is everybody has a very different path. I've worked with so many writers who've, people who have been training in it since like high school, college, went to school as like screenwriters, and like have like, kind of progressed that way. I've worked with people like I myself I didn't have a traditional start. I kind of had a totally different career before I moved into it. So the good news is that I think there's many different ways to get into it. The bad news is you kind of have to find your own way through. I don't know how everybody else kind of feels on that, but it's like, it's really just trial and error and building the car and like trying to drive it while you're building it type of thing is my feeling. What was great in my experience was that I kind of started off as an assistant and kind of moved my way through. So I think that for me was like a comfort zone, and that like I kind of got to observe and like learn and sort of take things in by osmosis for a little bit before I kind of like got into it. So the best thing was being in a writer's room, having access to those writers to understand what their process is, kind of doing notes as a roundtable so that you start to hear what is in your head but is maybe not getting through on the page, was like a tremendous sort of learning experience. But I think really like the key stuff is like you have to keep writing and keep writing about stuff that is close to you. I don't always take that advice. It's like I give this advice and I always like kind of forget to take it, but it is one of those things where it's like if you're not honing those skills, it's not going to come to you. So I think like no matter what, kind of keeping that going, keeping those connections going that you're meeting either through, socially or on jobs. But I think the important thing is just to sort of know that there's no right answer. And really the goal is to sort of collect, bits of data and like ways that other people have done it and sort of cobble that into, you know, your own sort of way of doing things.
Brittany, you have anything to add to that?
Sure.
Like, yeah, I can add to it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people talk about like finding your voice being such a key component of becoming a professional writer, but a lot of people don't talk about how to do that or what that means. They're just like, just find your voice. Maybe it's in the closet. Like you don't know where where it's supposed to be or how you're supposed to find it. But I feel like a lot of that is just mixed in with picking your path and just going for it. Like if you know you want to work in comedy, finding your voice and making those connections often are overlapping endeavors. It's whether it's like doing stand-up, taking classes, watching shows, and figuring out what sort of comedies you like. As many different paths that there are, ultimately you just have to pick one and try to do that. Like the sort of meandering, just like I'm just gonna wait to see what comes to me. In my experience, is not helpful. You really just have to sort of put yourself as close to the world as you can be. Like even if it's just adjacent, just make sure that you have like your fingers on something in the world and really go hard and run your mouth. Just talking constantly. Like I straight up got a job one time at the Abbey, which is a gay bar in West Hollywood. I just was telling someone I had just met I wanted to be a PA, and through some winding road that like ended with me getting like my first paid comedy writing job, because you really cannot predict where it's going to come from. But if you are talking pretty much incessantly, you're just raising your odds that it's going to happen for you.
Listen, my mom says closed mouths don't get fed. That's all I know. Christy, you want to add anything?
I mean, yeah, in Scotland, we've got a term, it's called gallus, and it just means be really ballsy, I suppose, and don't listen to reason. I had no connection to the film industry other than loving movies. And when I was about 14, 15, I saw they were shooting a TV show like in Glasgow, and I just wandered onto that set and refused to leave. And I went back every day. It was like the school holidays, and I kept going. And then eventually they were like, if you're going to be here, you should help. And that's how I started working in film. And I remember they said, like, they were like, if you come next week, can you drive? And I was like, no, I'm 15. I don't have a license. And they were like, okay, we'll work out how to pay you. And so I had no idea I wanted to be a writer. I didn't even know that scripts were a thing that someone did. Like as I understood it, TV just became. And I was always totally enthralled to it. And so I kind of, every school holiday, like every semester, every break, and sometimes during school would work as a runner, would work as a PA, or would go in and assist the editor. And sort of through that, I kind of meandered my way into writing. And whilst I was writing, my first writing gig also involved me like cleaning the studio after work. Like it was not WGA, shall we say. But then I realized I loved it. That's how I found it. And I went to film school as well because I needed an excuse to move to London where more things happened. And so I found that really useful. And that's how I found my voice. Like I kept writing short films and making them with people and seeing how bad they were. And instead of being, oh, those directors ruined my film, I was like, how should I write this so that they cannot ruin my film? And it's not possible, but it's a really fun endeavor to work at. Like you have to kind of, do that. And so I think the hardest part is when someone says, how do I get into the industry? And they want to know how you did it. It's kind of like telling someone where you bought your lottery ticket. Like I can tell you like the bodega that I bought the ticket in, but I don't know if that bodega will sell another winning ticket. And I think a big part of it is kind of also being open to fate. I know a lot of people that went in, they're like, I definitely want to do this. I definitely want to be that. And then they kind of find themselves on this path and they find themselves drawn to something that they love. That happened to me. Like I loved writing. I was totally drawn to it. And when I found out I didn't have to get up before 9 a.m., I was like, tick, done. And so, yeah, like good luck, good fortune, and shocking amount of false confidence, I think, is the key component.
I love that. I love the fact that both times I've heard meandering, I'm about to infiltrate that word into my vocabulary. Come on, Dana, give me something good.
Well, I just think what everything everyone's saying is great. My thing is always say yes. Walk through the open door. Say yes to whatever weird connective tissue you can make. Do whatever job you can do in the industry, because you never know when it's going to lead you back toward what you thought you wanted to do. And also you might discover you want to do something completely different. But just any job you can get in the business gets you started. And then it becomes also about relationships. It's about the other people that you meet. You never know when the other PA is going to end up running a show and remembering you, or, you know, that's really what it's about. And then the other thing, I really liked what I heard about writing, because, you know, keep writing, because someday, I just got an email today, like, Lifetime is looking for a TV thing and they want to shoot it and have it on the air by August. And, you know, what if you had that thing? Or if you were a buddy of mine and you had that thing, I could at least say, well, here, try this. You know, so that's how you be ready when the moment might strike, you know?
Yep. My mother also says, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. I know I'm just infiltrating into our conversation. Go ahead, Charisse.
I like your mother. Your mother has got some good stuff.
Yeah, seriously. I think I don't have too much to add to what everyone was saying, because I agree with it, especially the part about like buying a lottery ticket at the bodega. It's like a good metaphor. But I started out as a playwright, and I had a mentor named Paula Vogel, who had this like philosophy about fellow travelers, right? Like identifying your fellow travelers. It's like, here are the things I love to write about. Here's what I feel passionate about. Who are the writers who also have these preoccupations and obsessions, right? And how did they get their starts, and where did they get their starts? And sort of, once you find the things that you love and really care about and are passionate about, sort of finding the people who have blazed those trails already and seeing if there's a way to follow in those footsteps. So my first writing job came from a playwright that I really admired, who had just made the transition from playwriting to TV writing. This woman named Tanya Sriracho, and I just like, I knew, like, we had a friend of a friend, and I emailed her and I was like, can I take you to lunch? And it ended up, she handed this pilot script of mine to the producers of the show she was working on. That was how I got my first job. So just kind of finding your tribe, I think, is important too. Like finding the people who you connect with, like aesthetically, I think is a big deal. So that's the only thing I have to like add to that.
Cool. So since this is the Power Woman Summit, I just want to find out from each one of you, who is that powerful woman that lit a fire under your butt to get you to where you are today? I know for Charisse, it was Paula Vogel. Isn't that who you said?
Oh yes, she was a major part of it. Yes.
So for Ning, who was it for you?
I would say the women in my family, for sure. I think just growing up and seeing how they hustled, like no matter what, was inspiring.
Brittany?
I don't know, man. I don't have a go-to answer. I mean, maybe I think just all of the women whose names I saw when I was watching sitcoms. Like there are so many, like Liz Merriweather, Aisha Muharrar, like all those names. Every time I saw a woman's name pop up on one of those shows, I think that was just a bunch of tiny sparks.
Cool. Dana?
Yeah, I had a drama teacher, Julie Gehring. She's passed away, you know, in the last 10 years. But she was just, she just made us believe that we could do anything and follow any path. And, you know, when I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, you know, there's not a lot of people there who think you could go and have a career in the movies. But she always was like, sure you can, you know.
Cool. Christy?
I mean, yeah, I think it would be, I had a bunch of great teachers. I went to an all girls school as well, and they had like no concept of like not realizing your potential. They were just like, go out and try and do it. And so I was like really fortunate with my education. But I think like ultimately my grandmother, who like loved to tell stories and tell really weird, really bad stories and make up songs and stuff like that, was really creative. And I remember kind of people would say to her like, oh, this is silly. And she would always be like, it's never silly if you enjoy it. And that, I think, was a big thing, is through her, this idea of like, why take the safe road? Why not do something that you really enjoy? Like, why not try? The worst thing that can happen is that you fail and end up penniless and can't pay your rent, which is bad, but ultimately it might work out.
That is pure comedy. So we've been talking about your journeys. We've been talking about people that matter to you. We've been talking about your muses. Last but not least, I want to get into, you all have told stories that in one way or another are inspiring or important from one vantage point or another. From this point moving forward, what is a story that you haven't told that's inspiring to you that you would want to tell? I'll start with Christy.
Where to begin? I mean, I think in particular, I think history is littered with women whose stories have been cannibalized by men, stolen by men. What's that quote? For most of history, Anonymous was a woman. And I love history. I love to dig in, and I love the real story. So I think pretty much all of history. I'd love a big historical epic about, you know, one of these fantastic female rulers that over time they become, you know, a punchline or a joke. So something like that, where you get to really, really dig into the story.
I love that. Charisse?
Sure. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to tell so many stories, but the thing that popped into my head was just finding space for joy and prioritizing it. I mean, like, there's so much in this world that is telling us not to be joyful and not to seek pleasure. But I think I want to write something about someone who does that.
Okay, Brittany?
Yeah, I have a very specific answer for this one, strangely. I want to make a show about the deputy gangs within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
Ah,
That is
good.
very specific. And can you just
I would watch that.
I would watch that too. Can you just share why that's a passionate thought process for you?
Yeah, sure. So I was a researcher and editor on this series called A Tradition of Violence, which is a 15-part investigative reporting series written by Cerise Castle about the deputy gangs within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. There's a podcast out about it now, actually, that she's doing. And it's just strange that more people don't know about it because they are terrifying and very bad. And they've murdered lots of men of color, specifically men that have been undergoing mental health emergencies. And this is just something that if you live in LA, you should know about this. And probably if you live in the entire United States, you should know about it, because it's not something that is only happening in LA, though it is, I think, the most pervasive here.
Absolutely. That's pretty good. How about you, Dana?
I want to write about sex, about women and sex, and how how does a woman experience sex not performatively? Like, what is it to just really let yourself express your sexuality or have a partner that you're not like doing what you think they want you to do? That's something I'm really interested in writing about.
I'm glad you said that, Dana Stevens, because let me just tell you this. I'm just going to infiltrate myself into the conversation for a second. I would love to see you ladies either collaborate or inspire one another to write this project. We never see women talking about menopause. Like, it was like this dirty little subject. People would call it the change. We never talk about women talk about menopause. We never see women of a certain age dating and what that looks like. We never talk about what the effects of menopause are toward women of a certain age and how that affects them. I want y'all all to kind of collaborate on a subject like that and just bring it to the masses for a sister. Could you do that?
I think I'm the only one who might really be able to, because I've been there.
I just need to see that subject happening. And so, just to close it out, I just want to thank all of you. You all are such powerfully influential, inspiring women in every way possible. I cannot even begin to tell you how important and how exciting it has been for us to have you as part of the Power Women Summit conversation. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot in the process. You guys lightened it up and you kept it serious, but you kind of like, you know, spaced it out a little bit, which I appreciated. And I just want to thank you all individually. Ning Zhao from Ozark, Christy Christy Wilson Carnes from The Good Nurse, Sharice Castro Smith from Encanto, Brittany Nichols, Abbott Elementary, and Dana Stevens from The Woman King. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your time, for your writing, for your talent, for your skills, and for sharing everything that you could with us today. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Carla.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you for having us.
You.